Hello everyone. I'm Dr. Mary Jayanthi from the Department of English, and I am here to give you an overview of classical criticism and Plato's Republic. So what will you learn? At the end of this short video lesson, you will be able to summarize the overview of classical criticism and also summarize the main points of Plato's Republic. Criticism is an innate activity, says Mark Roberts. When you read something, you will be always able to say whether it is good or bad. And that's a reaction. And this reaction is criticism. And we always have this innate activity happening to us when we choose something, when we want to buy something, when we eat something, when we read something, and when we watch something. So criticism is a part of the human mind which happens, and every literary criticism is a reaction or a response of a reader to a literary text. Criticism of literary works are an analysis of the literary works that are being done by the readers and critics. The critics evaluate, judge, and also critic the given genre. The critic and the creator are two different persons. The creator creates and a critic evaluates, appreciates, and opines about the value of the work. The function of criticism is to interpret and also to have a dispassionate and non-judgmental evaluation of a literary text. This will in turn motivate the creator to write an excellent piece of work which will aid and support a reader to read in an enlightened manner. Now, classical criticism. Classical criticism takes its root in the civilizations of the Greek and the Romans. Western literary canon takes its roots in the works that were created in early Greek and Roman civilization. And as you see here, the Greeks' work is the source of Western culture. And classical literary criticism takes its source from both the Greeks and the Romans. And the Greeks' civilization and also their philosophical work have a greater impact on the predecessor. The Greek civilization is older than the Roman counterpart. The Roman culture, philosophy, and literature has taken a lot of inspiration from Greek culture. We can always have a trace of the early influence of the Western literary canon from the classical literary criticism. For example, in Plato's mimesis. Mimesis is a Greek word which means imitation. For Plato, poetry and art is thrice removed from reality, which means if anything is replicated or represented through any work of art, it means it's a replication and imitation of what is actually in nature. So for Plato, to understand this, example, you are inspired by a flower and you want to create something out of it. So you either write a song, sing a song, or dance about it, write about it, or create a drama about it. For Plato, whatever you have created is an imitation of what is there already in nature. And this idea of imitation is one of the primary bases of the classical literary criticism. Next is Aristotle's Poetics, which established the classical definitions of tragedy and also distinguished poetry from history. The 6 elements of tragedy holds good for even a present interpretation of a tragic text. And the third one is Longinus. Longinus' theory of sublimity is something that is so profound which has an impact even in the aesthetic theory of the 19th century. Now, what is sublimity? When you say something is sublime, it means something is so powerful that it can impact the reader. For example, if you read a text, you get the wow moment of the text. And the wow moment of the text are characterized by 5 innate qualities of sublimity. It can be a noble thought, a great diction, arrangement of words and the figures of speech, and also a good diction which always helps in creating sublimity. And when a work of art is assumed to be sublime, or it is interestingly very sublime, it means it evokes and transforms and lifts the reader into the world of art. And any work of art that can create sublimity always stands the test of time. The classical critics had their views on the importance and functions of poetics. By poetics, it is not just limited to poetry, but any work of art. Poetics is a general term which refers to any art form. It can include the theatre, dance form, singing, or the writing form. So, for Plato, the function of poetics is to teach, and it has to have a utilitarian value. For Aristotle, the function of any art is to entertain. And for Horace, it is both to teach and also to entertain. For Longinus, it is to transform. Any work of art has to transform and export the reader into the realm that is created by the writer. So these are the views of classical critics on poetics. Plato is the most celebrated disciple or student of Socrates. And in classical criticism, you can notice an interesting lineage of teacher-student relationship. Socrates, the most prominent of the Western philosophical thinkers, has an excellent student, and he's Plato. And Plato's student is Aristotle. And Aristotle's student is the second son of Philip, Alexander the Great. Today, we will just have an overview of Plato's works and also Plato's text, The Republic. Plato was born around 427 BC and died around 348 BC. And Plato was concerned with the decline of the national character. In his book Republic, he speaks about an ideal state where he also gives a definition and the importance of justice and how a just government and a just city-state will always create happiness for the common man. And in his ideal state, Plato states that poets have to be banished. This is because poetry has to always help the reader to keep in touch with reality. But according to Plato, poets use ornamental language and also imagination, which is far from reality. So the effect of such texts will always create a kind of fantasy in whom he calls as young guardians. Young guardians are the youth of his nation, whom he always feels have to be nurtured emotionally, physically, and spiritually to become strong citizens of the country. So he speaks about the decline of the national character and the ways education and the choices that they make will elevate a common youth to work of a warrior in order to sustain the city. So he discusses in great variety of matters, citizen and the state quest of truth, which challenge the established beliefs and conventions. And also primarily, the text inquires the value of literature and also the impact it has on the society and the common man. And the important works are Ion and The Republic. The Republic is arguably the most important of Plato's works. As discussed earlier, it talks about the need for a national character of an ideal state wherein every citizen is groomed in such a way that they follow justice and there is good governance which results in the happiness of every common man. And The Republic traditionally was published in 10 books, and it's a kind of an extended conversation which embraces a central argument, and it is written in Socratic dialogue. A Socratic dialogue is a conversation between two or more people wherein the participants are engaged to critically think but independently speak about what they have thought about the subject matter. So, Republic is an excellent example of a Socratic dialogue, and it can be seen as a kind of debate a fitting description for most of the dialogue. The Republic was written around 380 BC and it is an intent dialogue which is there to establish an ideal state and becomes a model for existing and also emerging societies. And it's a text that ideally describes what an ideal state can be and have an effect on the young guardians, and how each and every citizen of the ideal state can contribute effectively to the fullest potential to the growth of the city. And it also states that the concepts of justice, so it has an alternative title which is on justice. So these are the major intents of the debate. They are three. 1. What constitutes justice in a given state? 2. Whether or not a concept of justice may be determined by citizens in a given state. And the third one, how justice may be accomplished in a given state. So the participants in the debate are friends and acquaintance of the central character Socrates. Socrates is the main speaker of the Republic, and the setting of the whole dialogue is in Cephalus' house, an older, wealthier gentleman who has invited friends and acquaintances for a festival that is to celebrate the Thracian goddess Bendis. The speakers of this dialogue are first Socrates, as I told you, the major speaker. His name means master of life, and he is a persona of Plato, and maybe Plato wanted to immortalize his teacher's name and he gives the main character his teacher's name, Socrates. Next is Cephalus. He signifies a seasoned and an experienced man who is not a philosopher but has lived a life of virtues of what he has heard of, and it is in his house the whole dialogue and conversation takes place. The third one is Polymachus. Polymachus is Cephalus' son and also the pupil of Lysias, a teacher of rhetoric. And you can also see that Polymachus is very laconic in his dialogue, and also he inherits the responsibility of the host when his father Cephalus leaves the conversation. The next character is Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus is a sophist, a teacher of specious rhetoric, and we can see that Socrates loves to engage in conversations with Thrasymachus because he is quite articulative, and there are points when their intellectual debate reduces into a petty quarrel too. And the next character is Adimantus, an older half-brother of Plato, and his name means soothsinger, and he's a young man in the dialogue and something of a poet. And the last one is Glaucon, who is also a half-brother of Plato, and his name means owl or gleaming eyes, and in the dialogue, he's a young man. So these are the primary 6 characters who are engaged in the dialogue in the Republic, who speak about justice and is concerned about the just state, and this is a replication of Plato's thought to create an ideal state. One of the most interesting literary aspects of the Republic is that Plato uses a lot of allegory. Here, I thought I will just introduce you to one allegory, and if you see the picture here, the picture is the allegory of the cave, and this allegory of the cave is here with an underlying meaning that education alone can lead to enlightenment and bring the man out of darkness. And if you closely take a look at this picture, you have prisoners looking at the wall. They are chained in both their hands and legs, and they are not able to see what is happening behind them. And they keep watching objects that are shadowed, which is a reflection of the objects that are behind, which are being projected by the fire that is there. So what happens is, these prisoners are in the dark and they also do not understand what is the reality that is happening behind them. And the uneducated mind will always believe that whatever is shadowed in front of them is the truth and the reality, and they will not be able to look beyond what is being projected. And later, Plato explains if one or two of the prisoners somehow identify the need to unchain themselves and come out, they try to clamber up to the mouth of the cave. On their journey, they also get to encounter the fire. The fire will always hurt the eye which is used to darkness, and somehow they clamber out of the cave. One or two people pull them out, encourage them to come out, and you see the enlightened man on his way to his enlightenment journey is standing in front. And when he encounters the world, he sees a whole world of light, and he comes to learn that life is more than shadows and there is more to reality. And having experienced this kind of reality, he is so much taken up and exalted that he wants to come back into the cave and release the prisoners. But ironically, what happens is when he comes back, he's again blinded by the darkness that is there. And what happens is, since the prisoners there have very narrow perspectives, they assume that the light outside or the world outside or the experience outside has blinded him and we should never go out. This is an important allegory which is pivotal in Plato's Republic, which says that we are limited by our experiences, our perceptions and our ideals, and we try to see what is there in the world or what we are projected, the shadows of reality and not reality as such. And Plato also says right education will always enlighten the mind, and that will help us to see things in a wider perspective. In simple words, there is more to what we always see, and it is always good to give the benefit of doubt to what we don't see and also engage in conversations and reading to understand situations better. So having given you a taste of the allegory, in conclusion, Plato's text, The Republic, is one of the most important texts in the Western literary canon, which is prescribed even today in order to evoke the critical thinking in students, because it's a text which allows you to question what is already established, the conventions and the beliefs and the reasons behind. And Republic is a text which raises questions on what is justice and what is true happiness. And as we know that the answers to these questions are ever evolving, and questioning is a critical skill which each of us need to always develop, and it is a good literary read. I hope this short video presentation will always motivate you to get to the text of Plato's Republic, where you get nuggets of Plato's wisdom to create an ideal society. And as a last note, here is a digital detox question I have for you. If you are an avatar of Plato, what is that you will introduce and what is that you will eliminate to ensure justice? I leave you with a reflective question, and I'm so happy you could listen to me. And these are some of the questions that can help you to summarize the concepts that have been spoken here. And happy learning. Thank you.